This is Stephanie, and I'm excited to chat with you all today. Thanks, Tiffany, for introducing us. I just want to call out, we're staring at a title slide right now, which says, Iterating on a State Digital Service Team, the Colorado Digital Service Team's one-year retrospective. And just to note that like many of the other wonderful presentations that we've heard during the summit, we'll be reading our slides out loud and describing images to maximize accessibility for all our attendees. This slide also has logos that represent the Colorado Digital Service, as well as logos that represent the state of Colorado and the Office of Information Technology, or OIT. Our team has a dual reporting structure, and we report both to OIT and the governor's office. Moving on to the second slide, which says hello and welcome, and includes images of our three speakers, as well as names, pronouns, titles, and organizations. To kick it off, I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Stephanie Cain. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm a UX researcher and designer on the Colorado Digital Service team. I'll pass it to my colleague Karyn, who will introduce herself next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karyn Liu, and I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am a product manager on the Colorado Digital Service team. We are also very happy to be joined today by our friend Randy from 18F. Randy, will you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Randy Hart. I go by pronouns he, him. I'm with 18F, which is a digital services consultancy within GSA. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Randy. This is Stephanie again, and I'm moving on to the third slide here. The Colorado Digital Service is a small, diverse, and cross-functional team of senior engineers, UX researchers and designers, product managers, and procurement and contracting specialists. We have the ability to partner with any of our 17 state agencies to develop and improve user-centered solutions to Colorado's most pressing technical challenges. Our team was formed in October of 2019 at the direction of Governor Jared Polis to mimic at the state level the model of federal digital service teams such as the United States Digital Service, or 18F. Listed on this slide are our team's values. They are: be curious, start with the problem, move to action, be humble. Government was here before us and it will be here after us. Challenge the status quo, social justice, find the truth, tell the truth, which credit goes to USDS, strength in diversity, which is inspired by protect democracy. And finally, government is us, just us, which credit goes to Megan Smith on that one. Moving on to slide 4. As a team, we're always looking for opportunities to improve the way we work. And at our 1-year anniversary, Karyn and I began a project to reflect on the past year. Specifically, our team wanted to learn, how did our agency partners view the value that our team had provided? What happened after we rolled off a project? And finally, what opportunities exist to improve the way we engage with our partners? Moving on to slide 5. Karyn and I approached this problem the way we would any other. We began by gathering data and asking questions. Our method, or how we did this, started with self-reflection. We collected value statements from each Colorado Digital Service team member. We used past team strategy and goal-setting conversations to guide our inquiry. We really wanted to know how our past year of work compared to the initial strategy we set out for our team. And after every project, our team conducts a retrospective to ask ourselves what went well and what could be improved for the future. So we went back and we pulled themes across past Colorado Digital Service retrospectives. And of course, we collected external feedback as well. We interviewed more than 40 state and vendor partners about their experiences working with us. Then we reviewed that feedback as a team and identified and committed to actionable goals so that we could improve the way we were working. Moving on to slide 6. To start, we'll share a bit about what we learned from our internal team reflection. On the left of this slide is a light blue graphic with the word cloud. This represents the words that came up most frequently in our individual team value statements. It includes words like demonstrating, service, need, help, people, expertise, and tech. On the right are a few key themes and quotes that we pulled from the value statements. They are teach by demonstrating. Quote, CDS delivers value by rolling up our sleeves in order to do the work alongside experts at agencies and by coaching and mentoring people to implement the same practices in their own work, unquote. The second is meet people where they are. Quote, We meet agency partners where they are at. We assess their values, their style, their needs, and their emotions, and connect with them in an authentic way that allows them to feel heard, end quote. And lastly, strong culture, quote, diverse brains and kind, smart, collaborative people in your corner, end quote. Moving on to slide 7. To collect external feedback, we decided to conduct 30-minute external interviews with partners that we had worked with in the past on a one-on-one basis. Though interviews are time-consuming, we often favor this method over asynchronous methods like surveys, because we can immediately ask follow-up questions to clarify a point or add additional detail to a person's response. Interviews provide a rich set of qualitative data to derive insights from. And we prefer individual interviews over focus groups because it's very easy for one person to bias another's answers. So this allows us to create a more neutral environment. On the left of this slide are some of the questions we asked ourselves during the interview, which include, before the engagement began, what did you expect from working with the CDS team? Did that evolve over the course of the project? Walk us through what happened with the project after the engagement with CDS ended. What advice would you give someone who is about to engage with the CDS team? And finally, what advice would you give to our team for future engagements? On the right side of the slide is a screenshot from the Google spreadsheet where we took notes during interviews and then later codified important quotes with common themes. Next, I'm going to pass it to Karyn to talk about what we learned from our external interviews.
Thank you, Stephanie. This is Karyn. We are on slide 8, which is titled How Our Partners Saw Us. Let's move on to slide 9 to talk about what we learned from talking with over 40 of our partners across the state. And as we go through each of these themes, Randy would also love to hear any reactions and insights from you as well. All right, on slide 9, our first insight is that partners valued our expertise, drive, and neutrality. So as Stephanie mentioned, as we synthesized the patterns from all of our interviews, we added 1 or 2 supporting quotes to each of these insights to bring them to life a bit. So the first quote here says, not being tied to the way things have always been done. That's really valuable, end quote. The second quote says, political neutrality is super valuable. You model functions that live in the middle space, IT and business, that help clarify the conversation and set the stage for these practices to evolve, end quote. So this was a big theme pointing to the value partners saw in our collective expertise on modern software delivery practices and how to organize teams that can work effectively this way. They also appreciated how driven we were to help and how willing we are to roll up our sleeves and work alongside them. And our perceived neutrality is valuable. Because we are not meant to be long-term owners of projects or products, we come in very much with a focus on outcomes and how best to serve our end users and all Coloradans in an equitable way. I'm going to pause a moment for you, Randy, in case there are any insights there.
Sure, thanks. 18F is set up in a similar model as Colorado Digital Services, and I will say that over the past 6 or so years that 18F's been in existence, one of the main things that really helps us help our partners is that neutrality of being another government agency, really looking to help and not having, any perceived conflicts with the advice we're giving. And the model we try to use is to leave our partners in a better spot than when we found them, so that they're not dependent on us being there forever, so that we can help them meet their objectives and then unwind in the right way. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, with 8 of us on our team and 17 agencies, we certainly cannot stick around forever. Okay, moving on to slide 10. The insight here is that we offer kinship, healthy culture, and a collaborative partnership. So the first supporting quote says, it was helpful to watch the way you work together. It's a great model for how teams should collaborate and work together, end quote. The second quote said, you constantly asked, what isn't working? What do we need to change, end quote. So we strongly believe that in order to build good technology, it is imperative, 1, to feel like a team, and 2, for that team to have a healthy culture that enables trust, collaboration, and growth. We as a team focus a lot on building up psychological safety, for instance. That's defined as a shared belief held by members of a team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk taking, and it is a top indicator for group success. In terms of partnership, we do our best to start by listening and meeting people where they are. We believe in engaging people who are impacted by a project into the decision-making process and sharing power through information and knowledge. We regularly practice retrospectives with our agency partners, like this one, in order to identify opportunities to improve the ways we're working together. And on this one, it was pretty wonderful to realize that something we were cultivating for the health of our own digital service team sort of organically became in itself a model for others to want to emulate. And one of my other favorite quotes we heard from this retro was, "Your feelings, people." Randy, any insights there?
Yeah, I think the main thing really is the culture change and not so much the technology changes that are necessary in government, because I was with government for 15 years before joining 18F. I know how hard the work is, and I know how important the missions are, and I know how seriously people take it. And sometimes they just need a little bit of help when it comes to helping shift the culture to some extent. It's a very risk averse environment, the government is, and there's a reason for that, right? There's a lot of things at stake with the work we do, but there's ways of trying to mitigate some of the risks without being too worried about outcomes if you can deliver things iteratively and get used to that culture of delivering things iteratively and not waiting till the end. And that's really that shift in thinking is really one of the more important things we try to help our partners out with.
Absolutely. We've often realized that in order to work in a way that ultimately de-risks everything, it actually feels like taking on a tremendous amount of risk up front to change. All right, moving on to slide 11. The insight here is that many people saw us as consultants, and that came with a lot of mixed connotations and emotions. So this one's pretty complex. The first quote says, "I hate to use the word consultant, but you come in with no dog in the fight and present what you think is the right thing to do based on past experience," end quote. The second quote says, "I was like, is this a subversive way of assessing what we're doing well and badly?" End quote. So this one came up a lot, and it gave us a lot of pause because there are obviously preconceived notions on what value external consultants bring. Some agencies have a really good experience with them and others very much do not. So even though we emphasize that all of us are state employees and that we're all on the same team, we are still often compared to or viewed as external consultants. So we think this was especially the case in the earlier days of our team's existence, when we did several time-bound discovery sprints because we wanted to quickly provide value. However, in reflection, the sentiments around that were very mixed because sometimes our recommendations cannot be implemented by the agency. Essentially, one interviewee summed it up really well when they said, "Your recommendations are only as good as our ability to implement them. If we could have, we would have. We couldn't, and so we didn't." Really curious to hear your thoughts on this one, Randy. I see you nodding quite a bit.
That was definitely something we encountered at 18F at the federal level. There were growing pains when it came to, I don't think it was we were naive in the beginning, but there was just a thought that things were a little bit easier to fix than they were, or there was a little bit more that could be done quickly. And I think we learned over time that some of the things that can be done outside of government just can't be done inside government because of multiple reasons. And so the big thing we try to do now is not just talk about strategies or anything else. We talk strategy, but we also try to think about what can we prototype out to test out where are the weaknesses, where are the blockers to going in the direction that we're advising, so that we can work along with them to hit those blockers together so that we can adapt. And I think there was some growing pains. We had similar similar retrospectives in the early years at 18F, where how do you figure out that role as an internal consultant, which people for good reason have mixed feelings about.
Right. Thank you. We are moving on to slide 12. And the insight here is that sometimes the language or processes we used felt unfamiliar and inaccessible. And not everyone felt comfortable asking us to clarify. So the supporting quote here is, even a retro. I get the word, but in public health world, I'd call it a debrief. It doesn't prohibit you from participating, but the fast pace of the work, it can feel intimidating and inaccessible if you don't feel comfortable asking, end quote. That's pretty telling, and that was a big aha moment for us. The two of us heard this from a public health person whom we had collaborated closely with for months, and it did not come up until this retro that they had no idea what we meant when we said retro. So for many of us used to working in an agile way, there's a lot of language and process that I think feels second nature to us. And we've learned to really pay extra attention and not assume any kind of pre-existing knowledge here. Even when we think we've stepped back a lot, language-wise, to meet folks where they are, we often need to step back even further. Language in particular can feel really intimidating if you aren't familiar with certain practices. And at the end of the day, does it really matter if we call it a retro or debrief if we accomplish the same goals? So one thing we've committed to trying to do is a language matching exercise early on in a future engagement to see if we can level set and move forward together with our partners with maximum shared understanding. We have a hypothesis that taking the time to do that will contribute a great deal to positive team dynamics as well. How amazing would it have been to realize at the very beginning that retro and debrief meant the same thing, right? And that some of our processes actually map really well. Is there anything like that you all do, Randy?
I think the main thing, not to answer that specific question, but the main thing that we're also finding is a lot of times when we do say things that are in the agile lingo, sometimes it's like foreign, or it's something that they've heard, our partners have heard over and over again, to not lead to the results that they were expecting. So immediately when we say things like, we're going to have a scrum, we're going to have a retro, our partners are like, we've tried that, we've had the consultants come in and do that, and they immediately turn things off. And so really thinking about the language around what the ceremonies are, if we call them ceremonies, all of that, it has to be very considered as we communicate with our partners, because there's something called Agile Fall. I'm sure folks have heard about. That's a very real thing that happens. That's been happening quite often in government for many years, where there's bits and pieces, and people are kind of tired of trying out little bits and pieces. And so really being thoughtful about the language is important.
Oh, that's such a good insight. Thank you. That's really important to integrate into how we look at language and matching in the future to those preconceived notions. And then that not everyone feeling comfortable to ask piece was really an aha too. If there isn't safety, some folks will just kind of go along and never say anything about how lost they feel. All right, thank you. Moving on to slide 13. Our insight here was that even after months of an engagement, some of our partners struggled to describe the Colorado Digital Service. Sometimes they saw us only as individuals and not as a team. So the supporting quote is pretty telling. I don't know what the Colorado Digital Service is or how to engage them, end quote. So we're still a relatively new team at the state. As such, a lot of folks don't know who we are just yet. We've been around a little over a year and a half at this point, but we have not done a great job socializing who we are as a team, what we do, what do we not do, and how exactly to engage with us. So as we've mentioned, there's definitely confusion between us and existing consulting firms that agencies are used to working with. And when we do take on a formal engagement, we try never to send someone in alone, which means there are at least two of us working together. However, that also means our small team is often split across multiple projects. So some partners never see the bigger picture of our entire team. And in terms of how to engage with us, there's a lot of confusion around what are official versus unofficial projects for us. And to be honest, we have not been super clear on that ourselves along the way. So that's something that we're continuing to work on. What does that look like in your world, Randy?
I think it's similar, right? I mean, just for any new agency that's starting up like yours or like 18F, figuring out the business model, or I hate saying business because we're not for government, but the model of the service that we provide and what services that they entail. It's something that we're constantly trying to figure out how can we explain what the services are that we do. I think we've gotten better about that. Another challenge is sometimes folks want to explain what you are that maybe don't know what you are, like folks outside outside of 18F or outside of our partnerships that are, it's just very hard to get that message out about what the goals are and what the team is actually going to be doing. And so I think we've, just over time, it's gotten better. We've focused a lot on trying to just work in the open as much as possible, so we can point back to work that we've done with our partners. We can point back to blog posts where if we've had an aha moment, we blog about it, so that the message is shared down, not only with external future partners, but internally at 18F, because we have folks that are, we have 4-year terms. And so we want to make sure that we retain things that we've learned over time. And that includes describing what it is that 18F does. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We've found that often we're so busy doing the work, we haven't really taken the proper breaks to reflect and talk about and write about the work. That's in part why we're doing this, actually. So later on, we'll share some other commitments we've made along those lines, but also recognizing that it will just take time. All right, so those were some themes that emerged from talking with over 40 of the folks that we worked with in some capacity in our first year. We are now on slide 14, which is titled Deeper Self-Reflection. And this self-retro, it really prompted a lot of deep thinking on aha moments along this journey. And in particular, what lessons have we learned the hard way? These feel particularly important to document as we come up on 2 years. And so we have a 2-year tour of service, which is so short. And some core founding members are about to rotate off their tours. So we want to make sure that these are passed on to new team members so that they can have a little bit of a head start. So let's talk about some of these hard lessons. And then again, Randy, we'd love to hear from you on how these resonate. Okay, we are on slide 15, and the first hard lesson is around where to focus and prioritize. Not every project is a good fit, even if we're passionate about the subject. We have learned how important it is to ask the right questions during project intake and to prioritize. We've definitely had some spirited debates as a team around whether we should only work on things we're passionate about. I think the different digital service teams approach this differently. Some are assigned projects and others choose a collective intake process like we do. So there have certainly been times when we've pursued projects out of passion, but for various reasons. If the folks at the agency just really didn't want our help, in those cases, we don't tend to get anywhere. And this leads to our second point. Some things are outside of our control. Not everybody will be on board with our work. To make peace with this, we have to remember that there is no shortage of good work to be done. Learning from folks who are more seasoned in this space, the advice has generally been to go where we're wanted. And that feels like pretty solid advice. And along the way, we've really had to refine and formalize our intake process a great deal. We've landed at a place that feels pretty good. And we ask ourselves a series of questions. So as an example, Does this project help us change the culture? Is technology even the right solution here? Do they want our team's help? Is there buy-in, and is there a champion at the agency? And is there a clear exit strategy? So when put into practice, this has worked really well for us to identify several projects that we have since said no to. And as a team of folks who generally want to say yes to everything, that's been extremely helpful. Thoughts, Randy?
Now, I'm just glad that you all are picking up where you are. That was definitely one of our growing pains as well. 18F has a similar model, I believe, and I'm not positive as CDS, maybe not. We're cost recoverable, so agencies pay GSA for our services, and so that helps us a little bit with that point about they want to have our support. But we also want to make sure that it's the support not just from the executive level, but also at the mission level, and hopefully some of the, the supporting structure of the IT services within the agency, just so that there's never going to be complete 100%. Everybody's on board from the beginning, bring us in. But if we can get kind of a little bit of that that triangle kind of on board and wanting to do things differently, wanting to try different things, that's really important. We in the past, we've taken on really high profile, really sticky engagements, and those are tough because it's a tough environment to go into. And if somebody's saying you're going to go with 18F and they're going to tell you what to do, that's just not a good fit for us, because we're very much not a top-down organization. We like with folks near where the work is, and so we try to find folks that are not only at the executive level, but at the work level, at the programmatic level to be more successful.
That makes a lot of sense. And also, I think is something that we did have to go through for ourselves to really learn. Stephanie, did you have anything you wanted to share on that? Okay. All right, moving on to slide 16. The second hard lesson is around change management and team culture. So Aaron Snow, who's the head of the Canadian Digital Service, visited with our team recently, and offhand, one of the first things he said was, "We're change management experts disguised as technologists." And the way he summarized this insight just sort of blew our minds. As we mentioned, team culture, that human layer is critical to any successful technology project. We have had so many moments in the work where we realized, oh, this blocker here, this is not about the technology or the tools or the process. This is about getting people to talk to each other. This is about getting people to feel like they're part of a team. This is about helping to strip away some of the fear around decision making. It's all about the people. That's the foundational layer that has to work before anything else can happen around technology. And at one point, we met with several change management specialists at the state, and were surprised to uncover lots of parallels between that discipline and user experience. One even said that change management is rooted in human-centered design. And that made perfect sense, once we heard it. And we think it's an entirely different mindset for a digital service team to think of themselves as change management specialists, maybe, rather than technologists. I think that would have reframed a lot of things if I'd heard that on day one. And that also means we think we identified another group of potential allies at the state too. What do you think, Randy?
No, I just 100%. The culture is the most important piece of the work that we're doing. It hit on it earlier. I'll say it again. We're in a very risk averse environment for a good reason, and we have to meet people where they're at and see if there's ways that we can help them meet in the middle when it comes to how they react to risk. I wanted to point out one thing, not shameless plug, but I'm not going to make any money off of it. We wrote something up called the de-risking guide at 18F with some of the lessons we've learned over the last 5-6 years. that also talks a lot about culture and some of the things. So I just wanted to throw that out there before I forget.
Yeah, wonderful. I think it was fascinating for some of us to learn about change management in particular as a discipline that exists. And there are change management specialists within every agency at the state. So it's also one of our goals to get to know them a little bit better too. All right, now I am going to pass it to Stephanie to go over a few additional hard lessons we learned.
Thank you, Karyn. This is Stephanie again. I want to plug again, the guide that Randy just mentioned is something that I send out to partners on a regular basis, and hopefully someone has shared it in chat. If not, I will later, but would highly recommend you use that. So a few more slides on what on our self-reflection. We're now looking at slide 17, which is labeled sustainability. When we get asked to work on projects, it's often because that team is struggling to get something done in the time they have allotted, and they've heard that we're a free resource that can engage quickly. That means that our partners are often so busy that they see us as an extra pair of hands on the project rather than coaches, which means that they don't always absorb new practices just by watching us work. There have been a few engagements where our agency teammates have struggled to continue implementing the same practices after we have rolled off projects. And it's helped us to identify opportunities to better set them up for success long before our engagement is over. And like Karyn said earlier in the deck, discovery sprints are only as valuable as their implementation. And as a reminder, a discovery sprint is a framework in which a team conducts research or discovery for a tightly scoped problem or opportunity in a short period of time, typically somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks. As our team formed and in the first few months, we really relied heavily on this framework in order to demonstrate value quickly. But in some cases, our agency partners felt frustrated at the end of discovery sprints because they were left with a lot of work to do and nobody to help implement them. So lastly, after we exit, our partners can face systemic barriers that prevent them from implementing processes that we advocate for during our engagements. We had one partner, for example, that was super excited by the stand-ups, by the retros, and the open transparency that we practiced during our engagement. But she tried to take those practices back to another project and was met with criticism for being too risky. And as we try to scale our practices, we have to recognize the larger environment that exists in government and how that can impact our ability to sustainably change behavior. I'll pause here, Randy, in case you want to add some additional thoughts.
That first point, especially our partners are so busy, they often see us as extra pair of hands. We find it really, really critical to find at least one person that can be what we call the product lead, which is different than what most government agencies are used to, which is a project manager. A product lead is somebody that does something a little bit different. That's a different presentation, but we really want to find somebody that can be that internal person that can work side by side with us. We do some coaching, we call it, but it's basically to just get that person used to working in these ways so that they can practice it when we're gone, so that the practices can be sustained. And then we hope as much as possible that this once we leave, it can spread organically. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, but organically, if success is seen in one project that did things a little bit differently, there might be others that want to do that, and that person that's served in that product lead role can play that role at their agency when we're gone.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We got a chance to work with 18F last year with you specifically, Randy. And one thing I was really impressed with is how much training and material that you provided for our agency partners during that project, which I think is also a really great way to spread those practices. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on here. We're looking now at slide 18, which is labeled attracting and supporting talent. One way that digital service teams often look to scale is by helping their governments hire people that are well-versed in modern software development practices. But we've learned quite a few lessons about growth. The first one is related to the point I made about sustainability. It can be really hard to change a system when you're just one person and you lack support. Similarly, a person hired into an agency is less supported than a person who's a part of a digital service team. They are often uniquely challenged in being the first hire of an organization into an organization that is unfamiliar with that particular skill set. In the past year, we've convinced several agencies to hire for new roles, like product management, for example. However, something that is key to our success on the Colorado Digital Service is that we are a team. And when you go in alone, it's much more challenging to sustain through the ups and downs. And moreover, your supervisor at the state most likely has no idea what you do or how best to support you. Of course, having the right motivation is important as well. The drive to work in a mission-driven organization is an important factor when hiring. And just because someone is a leader in the private sector does not make them a good fit for this type of work. This is a really, really hard job, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed. We've learned that the drive to improve the delivery of government services helps to frame the bad days in service of the larger goal. Without it, there's a risk of feeling like you're stuck in a hard and unsupported role with no relief in sight. Any thoughts, Randy?
I just 100% agree. Burnout is a factor, and we really find it important to go in as a team and support each other. It's 18F, just like Colorado Digital Services, is a very supportive organization. There's blameless retros, we call it, where there's not looking to assign blame. It's what are the facts? What can we do better next time? It's a really important thing to just make sure folks know we're in an area that's untested. And so there are going to be failures. We want to catch them as soon as we can, but we don't want people to feel as though they're out on an island if they make those failures. And so, yeah, and also we want to attract people that want to work in that kind of an environment that isn't so heavily hierarchical. It's a little bit more supportive from a team perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. So that's it for our self-reflection. Now we're going to share with you what we've committed to in order to improve the way we work. So we're looking at slide 19, which is labeled Improving the Way We Work. And we're really hopeful that the things that we've learned the hard way as a team can help the next generation of digital service delivery teams or individuals that jump into this type of work. We want to help you avoid making the same mistakes that we did and continue to improve upon ourselves collectively. So slide 20 here, again labeled Improving the Way We Work. First, we want to better define CDS and our value from the beginning. We're working on a document called a collaboration guide that describes who we are, how we came to be, and what it's like to work with us. We'll be publishing this on our public website soon so that we can better communicate to future agency partners up front. And we want more inclusion to bring people along in the process. We've implemented regular check-ins with one another to reflect and hold one another accountable to increasing inclusion and anti-racism in the civic space. We have begun implementing the language mapping exercise that Karyn mentioned earlier, as well as experimenting with different ways to incorporate equity pauses into our work on a regular basis. And in case you're not familiar, an equity pause is an intentional moment to stop and reflect together. We ask ourselves questions like, who are we serving? Who are we leaving out? And what impact, intentional or otherwise, could we be having with this work? We want to do a better job of transitioning off projects. This will likely be something we will always be iterating on. And one thing we're doing a better job of is thinking and planning for the roll-off from the very beginning of a project. We must remember that we are not long-term owners. It's so easy to get wrapped up in a problem or opportunity space and feel so passionate about it that you're willing to stay up hours past the end of the workday to get things done. I'm guilty of that on a number of occasions myself. But as we make the choice to put in those extra hours, we have to ask ourselves about the sustainability of that practice. When we are gone, who do we expect to continue that work and at that pace? Next, a phrase we use frequently, we break expectations and not rules. If people think that we're able to get work done because we circumvent the rules, then they don't see how they can apply those same practices to the way they work. We want to be even more transparent about our process so that they can scale beyond our team. We recognize that rules are in place for a reason, and we are not here as a team to break them. Lastly, we've picked up a framework from other digital service delivery teams that we've named the Advanced team. And we use this model to better scope projects before getting one-pagers approved by our CIO and the governor's COO. An advanced team is a way for our team to learn more about the problem before we commit.